allegations. That's followed by actress Olympia Dukakis on caregiving for elderly people. Afterwards, Tony Blankley, the press secretary to House Speaker Newt Gingrich. Then South Carolina Governor David Beasley on the Confederate flag. On tomorrow's Washington Journal, syndicated columnist Doug Bondo and Roger Simon will discuss the morning's headlines. And at noon, a radio simulcast of The Joe Madison Show from Washington, D.C. Next, a hearing on allegations of CIA involvement in illegal drug trafficking. Today, the Senate Intelligence Committee heard from two former Nicaraguan Contra leaders, Adolfo Calero and Eden Pastora. The committee is looking into charges that the CIA helped smuggle drugs into South Central Los Angeles in the 1980s. Senator Arlen Specter chairs the 3-hour and 15-minute hearing.
The committee will now proceed. Mr. Calero and Mr. Pastora, we appreciate your being with us. If you take your chairs. The hearing of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence will proceed on our inquiry into the allegations of possible connections with the CIA on the sale of narcotics in West Los Angeles, on the allegation of use of funds to support the Contras in the Nicaraguan War. These hearings have been prompted by a series of articles which recently appeared in the San Jose Mercury News on these allegations, and the committee thought it was important to pursue these matters to determine whether there was any substance to them. We proceeded on October 23rd with testimony from the Inspectors General of the CIA and the Department of Justice, and also Mr. Jack Bloom, who was counsel for a Senate subcommittee which made a similar inquiry in the late 1980s. The San Jose Mercury News identified a number of individuals as being involved in the drug trade and of having possible connections with the CIA, and we have proceeded to try to determine what the evidence is and what the facts are. Mr. Norman Meneses, who was a key figure mentioned in the series of articles, is in a jail in Nicaragua on drug convictions, and to this moment has declined to cooperate with the committee. Another individual, Rick Ross, has recently been sentenced, had been in detention in a San Diego jail, and we are making efforts to contact him. The committee yesterday in closed session took testimony from Mr. Blandon for about an hour and a half. Senator DeWine and I did, and we are seeking the testimony of certain key members from the CIA, Alan Friars and Dwayne Dewey Claridge, which we have not yet been able to obtain. And our committee is proceeding, although there are independent inquiries being undertaken by the Inspectors General of the CIA and the Department of Justice. We may yet have Mr. Blandon testify in an open session, but for the time being, we proceeded to take his testimony in a closed session at his request. And for purposes of the record, I will summarize what Mr. Blandon testified to. He described how he met Norman Meneses in California in late 1981, became involved in drug trafficking, as he put it, out of a desire to earn money for the Contras. Mr. Blandon testified that he was active at the time in local efforts to secure support for the Nicaraguan resistance, and these efforts included organizing fundraising parties and political rallies. According to Mr. Blandon, he accepted Meneses' proposition to sell cocaine in Los Angeles because he wanted to make more money for the Contras. Mr. Blandon told the committee that he had a difficult time breaking into the market because he had no previous experience selling cocaine. He testified that prior to late 1982 or 1983, he sent the profits from the drug sales, less his own expenses, to Mr. Meneses, who, according to Mr. Blandon, was providing assistance to the Contras. Mr. Blandon testified that when he severed his ties with Mr. Meneses in late 1982 or 1983, he owed Mr. Meneses $100,000. At this point, Mr. Blandon testified that he went into business for himself. His association with the Contra support group in California ceased, and according to his testimony, none of the proceeds from his sale of cocaine went to the funding of the Contras. It was at this time that Blandon began selling cocaine, as he put it, to Freeway Ricky Ross. Mr. Blandon stated that he did not share profits from his cocaine sale to Ross with the Contras. And it was for this narcotics trafficking that Mr. Blandon was arrested and convicted and spent 28 months in jail. The one exception to Mr. Blandon's discontinuation of support for the Contras was his meeting in 1994 with Eden Pastora, military commander of the Contra Southern Front, where he gave Mr. Pastora $6,000 and the use of a home in Costa Rica, at least according to the testimony of Mr. Blandon. The total amount of funds which he channeled to the Contras, according to his testimony, was between $60,000 and $65,000. In response to direct questions from the committee, Mr. Blandon stated that he had never had any contact with the CIA and that the CIA was not involved in his drug trafficking business in any way. He also testified that the Contra organization officials with whom he met, such as Enrico Bermudez and Eden Pastora, had no knowledge of his involvement in drug trafficking, and that he never discussed with them the idea of selling cocaine as a way to make money for the Contras. This morning we are going to continue our testimony and hear from the witnesses. Mr. Calero is a businessman who was recently elected to the Nicaraguan Parliament. In 1983, Mr. Calero became a member of the directorate of the Nicaraguan Democratic Force, FDN, and soon became its president and commander-in-chief. Prior to his joining the Nicaraguan resistance, Mr. Calero worked openly against the regime of the former Nicaraguan President Somoza and was jailed by the Somoza regime in 1978. Mr. Eden Pastora, also known as Commander Zero, was the Sandinistas' most popular hero and a senior official of their government until he distanced himself from them in 1981. In 1982, he publicly announced his opposition to the Sandinista regime. In 1983, he took up arms against the Sandinistas and became the preeminent leader of the Nicaraguan resistance, the so-called Southern Front. After leaving the resistance, he operated a fishing cooperative in Costa Rica, returning to Nicaragua, where he was a candidate for mayor in this fall's national elections. I'd like to yield now to my distinguished colleague, Senator Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to commend you as the chairman of the Intelligence Committee for convening this hearing and also making it a public hearing. There are so many hearings that we cannot make public, but this is a serious effort, I believe, on your part to get to the truth on some serious, very serious allegations in dealing with crack cocaine and a CIA connection, if any. I look forward to hearing these distinguished witnesses here today and other testimony as we pursue this interest on behalf of not only our committee but the American people.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Shelby. To the maximum extent possible, whatever the committee does on this subject will be done publicly. There's a great deal of public concern about these allegations. And conducting these hearings, as I said at the October 23rd hearing, we do not subscribe to or in any way support what the San Jose Mercury News has said, nor do we disagree with anything that they have said. Our job is to make an impartial determination as to what the facts are. Mr. Pastor and Mr. Calero, would you please stand so I can administer the oath to you? Raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony that you will give before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief? Mr. Calero, we will begin with your testimony. Would you tell us where you were born, raised, your early education, and your early activities?
I was born in Managua, Nicaragua, December 22nd of 1931, into a family steeped in the Judeo-Christian tradition, a highly reputed, well-known, and my initial education was at home, my grandparents, my own home. Then I went on to the Christian Brothers School for grammar school, then on to Holy Cross High School, New Orleans, where I finished in 1949. I was there from 45 to 49. Then I entered the University of Notre Dame in 1949, graduated in 1953, and Slew Holtz said last Saturday in his farewell address, and the best thing that could have happened or happened to him had been that he's had his children graduate from Notre Dame, and he spoke of Notre Dame's morals, principles, and purpose, which is something I carry with me very dearly. I worked in Nicaragua in Central America for the first 5 years after graduation. Then I joined with an American company, W.R. Grace. Peter Grace was the chairman of it. Then I joined the Coca-Cola bottling company, and I was hired as general manager, and I was in that position for 24 years until I decided in December of 1982 that life in Nicaragua was impossible, that my duty was to see how we could liberate Nicaragua, and that's immediately after I left. I joined the what was called the FDN, Nicaraguan Democratic Force, which was dedicated to the ousting of the Sandinistas, which were trying to change Nicaragua, trying to deny our nationality in the sense that they did everything against our culture, our religion, our way of being. And so I joined what was called the Contras, and I was with the FDN throughout, that operated in northern Nicaragua throughout until 1989, I would say.
How long did the active fighting go on, Mr. Calero?
Well, the active fighting began before I joined. The first actual impressive action was one in March of 1982. I was still in Nicaragua. And
were you involved in that fighting?
No, I was connected with these people. I had contacts with them.
When you say connected, what do you mean by that?
That I used to come to Miami and visit with those that belong to the organization that were in it and exchange views. They were trying to convince me to join, and I traveled to Honduras to see what was going on, what they had, who were heading the organization, what kind of people they were, and I did all this to see if I went to Costa Rica too, where I remember having a meeting with Eden Pastora, and
When was that meeting?
in 1982.
And where was the meeting?
In San Jose. And
The purpose of the meeting?
the purpose of the meeting was I had decided to go and fight, that I had no alternative but to go and fight the Sandinistas and to fight them in the only way that they could understand, that they would allow. And so my trip to Costa Rica, my trip to Honduras were to see where I was needed, where I could be of better service to my country. So after visiting both places, I decided that I could be of better service in the north, and that's where I joined.
And precisely what did your efforts involve in the aid of the Contra effort?
Well, they needed expertise. They needed people who had an education, who had a reputation, who could be trusted. And I seem to have combined those qualifications that they needed. And so I joined what was called the directorate, which was a 7-person directorate. And then, that was in January of '83, and in October of '83, it was decided that there needed to be one person in command, one president, and as happens in democratic countries, this president will be commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and I was elected by my peer to be such a person, and that's
so
why
you became the commander-in-chief of the Contra forces in October of 1983.
Yeah, of the FDM, of the Nicaraguan Democratic Force, in October of 1983.
Did you have any battlefield activities in connection with that position?
No, sir. My activity was practically a political activity, organization, authority, and
you had responsibilities to raise money for the FDN?
Well, when I first joined, we did not need to raise any money, and there were no efforts made to raise any money because we were being financed by the United States government, with congressional approval. I think there was a $14 million initial output.
Was the financing which you got from the United States government adequate?
Adequate?
Did you have enough money?
It was never adequate. It was never constant, and it was an on and off situation. It was pretty unreliable, I would say.
Well, I asked that from the point of view of whether you made any efforts to raise any money other than from the official sources from the United States government.
No, at the time, no.
Did you at any other time?
When we were cut off, and it seemed that it would be a while before we could get U.S. financing again, then we started thinking about raising money. And
did you do more than think about it? Did you actually try to raise more money?
We were very fortunate to have had a considerable contribution from, I later learned from Saudi Arabia, that gave us $30 million.
When did Saudi Arabia give you the $30 million?
Oh, I believe it was in '84. In '84.
And you did not learn about it at that time?
Well, I learned about the $30 million because I was asked to provide a bank account where it could be deposited, and I had a Nicaraguan friend who was a lawyer, who'd been a banker, and he handled all the financial matters. On the other hand, we started to contact people here in Washington who could help us out in raising money. And if I remember correctly, there was a man by the name of Carl Spitz Channel who handled the money-raising activities, and Carl Channel and then some other fellows whom I don't remember. And then there was an organized effort where we contacted people like of Mrs. Helen Garwood from Texas, a rich lady from Texas, Mr. Joe Coors, and a few other people who donated money for specific purposes. For instance,
How much money, if you recollect, did they donate?
Well, I did not handle that money. I believe that Channel raised through mailings, raised about $200,400,000 that we got. I don't know how much he raised exactly. Then Mrs. Garwood donated the money for a helicopter that I don't remember who bought it, but the thing is that we got it down there. And Mr. Coors donated for a STOL airplane, that is a short takeoff and landing plane that we needed to rescue the wounded and
when
for special missions.
Testified about this $30 million from Saudi Arabia, you said you didn't know that it was from Saudi Arabia at the time.
No.
How is it that you could get such a large sum of money and not know the source?
Well, because I heard, to begin with, the one who notified me about it was Colonel North, Oliver North, that I was going to get the money, and so right then and there I knew that it was something which was an official, I would say an official, it was the result of an official request, you know, and then I later learned.
Colonel North told you about the $30 million.
Yes, he said that we were going to receive
Did he tell
an
you
amount of money from a friendly government.
But he didn't tell you which government?
He didn't tell me which government.
And you didn't ask him?
No, I didn't ask him, no.
Why not?
Why not? Because...
no curiosity on your part about who's giving you $30 million?
No, I suspected that it could be some countries. I suspect it could be, it could have been Taiwan, it could have been Saudi Arabia, it could have been Kuwait.
But you didn't ask?
But I didn't ask, no.
And when did you find out that it was Saudi Arabia?
Oh, it came out in the papers. Or,
you didn't hear about it officially or from Colonel North?
Not that I remember. I mean, I don't remember at which moment I learned it was Saudi Arabia.
In connection with your duties as Commander-in-Chief, did you have contacts with the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency?
Oh, yes. At the beginning, well, right at the beginning, I did have contact with the CIA. I remember that.
What was your initial contact with the CIA?
On this matter?
On any matter.
On any
matter relating to your duties as Commander-in-Chief of the Contras.
On this matter specifically, because I knew CIA people from before. I mean...
I'm talking about your contact with the CIA on financing of the Contras effort in the Nicaraguan war.
Well, with the CIA, we never talked about financing because they were never, I mean, the only money that they did handle the money that was given by the United States government, and it was through them that it was received. And at first, we used to get the money from the Argentine military who were established in Honduras. And then the contact or the money dealing and the acquiring the materials we needed and everything was with the CIA once the Argentinians left.
Well, when did the money come from the Argentinians, as you put it, the Argentinians in Honduras? At what point in time was that?
When I first arrived in early 1983, was the Argentines who were in charge.
And how long did that last?
Only a few months, and then it was the United States that took over directly.
And when the United States took over directly, as you put it, who handled it for the United States?
The CIA used to make payments. We had a treasurer. We had a man in charge of financing. So I never did get any money to pay for goods that were purchased in Honduras.
Did you have any personal contact with anybody from the CIA?
Oh yes, I knew many.
Whom did you deal with?
The first person was an agent in Managua who requested that I come to Washington to meet a very important person in Washington, and that very important person turned out to be the commander-in-chief of the Honduran military forces, who needed to know what kind of people were going to be involved in this operation. And he asked me, "Are you going to be involved?" And I said, "Well, I have not come out of Nicaragua yet, but I am seriously thinking about it." That must have been in August of '82, and I left in December. The Hondurans wanted to know if there were responsible people and people who were not tainted with somocismo and who had good reputations, and because they wanted to associate themselves with people who were responsible.
So on that occasion, you met with an official from the Honduran government.
Yes.
Going back to the question as to any of your contacts with the CIA, did you have contacts with specific people in the CIA?
Yeah. Well, this man who was in Nicaragua, I don't remember the name now, was from the CIA. He was the one who got this contact here in Washington.
Was it your understanding that he was in the CIA?
Yes, I mean, he did not show me a badge, but we knew, we knew in Nicaragua that in the U.S. Embassy, the political attaché, or one of the political attachés, would always be a man working for the CIA, for U.S. intelligence.
Where did you meet that man who identified himself as being a Honduran?
In Managua.
I thought you met him in the United States.
Oh, no, come again. The Honduran, General Alvarez.
Yes.
I met here in Washington at the Watergate Hotel. And I also, at that time...
Just one meeting?
We had one meeting, yes. And then I also met CIA officials here. Some of them use names that weren't necessarily theirs. And,
how did you know that the names weren't theirs?
Well, because I later learned what their real names were.
What names did they use?
I remember the first man who talked to me a whole great deal was called Tony.
Did he have a last name?
I don't remember the last name. And then it turned out that he was someone else. Well,
what was his real name?
I don't remember his real name because he left. He was just at the beginning. Then I met...
How many people did you meet who didn't give you their real names?
Oh, I guess... Well, Dwayne Claridge, for instance, he went by another name when I met him. Then I found out in the paper that he was Dwayne Claridge. And
Dwayne Claridge misrepresented his identity to you?
He used another name.
What name did he use?
I don't remember.
Did you meet Alan Fires?
Al Fires. He used another name too, and then with time I found out that he was Al Fires. So.
Well, let's start with Dwayne Dewey Claridge. When did you first meet him, as best of your recollection?
In Miami.
When?
Must have been in 1982.
And where?
Before I left Nicaragua.
Specifically where in Miami?
At a hotel. I'm trying to think of the name of the hotel, but...
And what was the purpose of that meeting?
I would say they were trying to convince me to get out of Nicaragua and come out and help him out in this situation.
And what did you say?
Well, I said that I was inclined to do it, but that I wasn't ready for it yet.
And what name did Mr. Claridge use at that time?
I have it down someplace in a few notes that I.
But you're
have.
sure it wasn't Dewey Claridge as the name he used?
Oh yeah, I'm sure it wasn't that name. Yeah.
Sure he didn't use his right name?
No.
Do you have any idea why he would misrepresent his name?
Well, because CIA officials in Central America, when they come to serve as U.S. government officials, use their real name. But here in the United States, when they are not officials before any foreign government, then they tend to use other names.
When did you next meet Mr. Claridge?
Oh, I met him a number of times. I wouldn't remember. I mean, I met him in Miami, and then I met him in Washington, and met him in Miami again. And
what was the purpose of all these meetings?
all this, well, it was a matter of our joint operation.
Same purpose? Did he ever use his right name?
Oh yeah. Later on, after he used his correct name. Yeah.
When he used his correct name, did you ask him why he had been using
No,
an
because
assumed name?
because I was sort of familiar with that kind of thing. Besides, we in the resistance or in the Contras, we a lot of us also used other names. Huh?
Did you ever use another name?
No, because I was so obvious that I mean, nobody would ever believe me.
And when did you meet Mr. Alan Fires?
Alan Fires? Don't remember exactly what year, but he took over after someone else left. After this Tony, I believe, who went to Europe, then he became the man in charge of Central America.
Where was it that you met Mr. Fires?
For the first time, I don't remember. It could have been in Honduras, could have been here in Washington.
What was the purpose of your meetings with Mr. Fires?
To discuss this joint operation.
Did you ever discuss with Mr. Fires or Mr. Claridge financing of the Contras?
Well, they tended to keep away from that, and they tended not to speak of ways that we could use to lobby Congress, because they said that was against the law. So when we ran out of money, I remember I began coming to Washington in 1984 to lobby for U.S. financial support.
Did you talk to Colonel North about funding for the Contras?
Oh yes, he was aware that we were in bad shape and that we needed to raise money, and he was helpful to us.
Does the name Oscar Danilo Blandon Reyes mean anything to you?
No, it didn't mean anything to me until I read his name in the Washington Post, I believe it was, or in the San Jose Mercury News article that was brought down by a Washington Post reporter to Nicaragua, and then I saw his name, Blandon Reyes, and until then I realized that who his father was and who his mother were.
Did you ever know Mr. Blandon?
No, I could have seen him as a child in Nicaragua.
Did you know his parents?
I knew his father and I knew his mother, yes. They were very nice people, very good people.
Does the name Juan Norvin Meneses Cantarero mean anything to you?
Norvin Meneses was the brother of a general in the Nicaraguan army, well known, and he was a cousin of another general in the Nicaraguan army, so the name was familiar. And I never met him in Nicaragua.
Did you ever meet Mr. Meneses any place other than Nicaragua?
of the resistance used to visit cities in the United States where there were heavy concentrations of Nicaraguans in order to obtain their political support. I used to hear from congressmen that, that they needed, in order to vote for us, that the left was pretty tough on them. The CISPES, which was the Salvadorian communist outfit, had a lot of sympathizers, and we needed this, and some of these congressmen needed the political support. So we used to go to cities where there were lots of Nicaraguans and tell them about this need that congressmen had, so for them to do something, not to go to rallies or to promote.
Was it in that connection that you met Mr. Meneses?
In that connection,
where did you meet Mr. Meneses?
I met Mr. Meneses in San Francisco, California, maybe in the year 1984, maybe 1985. I met him on 2 occasions.
Maybe more?
No, on 2 occasions, and they were in connection with these gatherings of Nicaraguans that we had.
How long did the first meeting last?
Well, I did not meet with him personally. I met with a whole lot of people.
How long did the meeting with a whole lot of people last?
Oh, I don't know. It was a dinner. First, it was a dinner. Could have lasted 2.5 hours.
Did you have some conversation with Mr. Meneses?
I must have, but I don't remember.
And when? How long did the second meeting last?
I don't remember, but it was some kind of a seminar that we had at the Drake Hotel or something in California, and it was, I was there with the bishop from El Salvador who used to support the rightist cause in El Salvador.
Do you recollect having a specific conversation with Mr. Meneses at that time?
I talked to, I talked to all of them. Everybody had questions to ask me, mostly. How are things going? What are you doing?
Did Mr. Meneses ever provide any money for the conference?
Not 1 cent.
Are you sure of that?
I am sure of that. I heard from Enrique Bermudez, who is now dead, that, and who had reason to know Meneses because Bermudez was a member of the Nicaraguan army, and so was Meneses' brother. And Bermudez told me that Meneses had come to Honduras in 1982 and had brought with him a crossbow and some sporting goods for the troops to enjoy. And that's the only conversation that I remember ever having with Meneses, with Bermudez about Meneses. And I can, because I've read lots of things on this, I can tell you that Meneses was never appointed anything in San Francisco.
Well, precisely what did Mr. Bermudez say that Mr. Meneses did?
That he had come down to Honduras, had brought in this crossbow.
And brought in what?
A crossbow. You know, those bows that you...
Crossbows.
Yeah, crossbows, yeah. They used to use in the Middle Ages, huh? And,
what was the purpose of bringing in crossbows?
A crossbow, Meneses thought, would serve for special operations or something like that, Bermudez said. And he laughed it off, you know.
Be used as a weapon.
As a weapon, yeah, yeah.
But it was unrealistic?
Totally unrealistic. Bermudez laughed it off, I remember.
And that's all Mr. Bermudez said that Mr. Meneses did? That's
all Bermudez said that Mr. Meneses ever did, yes.
Did you know that Mr. Meneses was engaged in drug trafficking?
I had no idea that he was engaged in drug trafficking. I saw him as another Nicaraguan moving freely within the United States, in and out of the United States. So I had no reason to believe, nor suspect, nor imagine that he was in any kind of an illegal activity. As a matter of fact, he was jailed in Nicaragua, not in the United States. Huh?
Did you know that Mr. Blandon was engaged in drug trafficking?
I never heard Blandon. Blandon's name never came up around the 80s.
Did you ever hear any discussion in any way with anyone about drug trafficking to provide money to support the Contras?
Never heard. I never did. And if I ever, I can tell you one thing. If I ever would have had knowledge or a notion that something like that could have been going on, I would have denounced it. I certainly was not going to join in such a crime, which was absolutely foreign to my way of being, to my way of life. I would have never covered or abetted or looked the other way on something like that.
Did you ever know of or hear anything about anybody from the CIA being involved or looking away when drugs were being sold to finance the Contras?
Never. I must say that I have a very high opinion of the CIA people that I dealt with. I knew some of their families. I knew them personally, of course, and they seemed to me as God-fearing family men, very much dedicated to a cause which they considered important for this country. And so I could have never suspected nor never imagined that any of the CIA officials that I met, that I worked with, would be capable of ever going into any kind of illegal or immoral or criminal activities.
Aside from the issue of drug sales, did you know of the CIA making any effort of any kind in any way to provide funding for the Contras when the official United States funding was cut off?
No, they were very careful. We used to joke about it, you know, we used to call them the siacos, you know. It is CIA and CIAC or siacos, or the members of the CIA. They're always asking questions and never giving any answers was what we used to comment. They always want to know everything, and they seldom inform you of anything. We never, and as far as fundraising, I remember clearly that Alan Fires would say, I don't want to hear about that. You know, if we started to talk about something that they were not supposed to be involved in. I don't want to hear anything.
Now, what was it that Alan Fires didn't want to hear about?
Anything that would, let's say, that would involve our lobbying or efforts we were making to raise funds.
Well, when you say he didn't want to hear about it, was that a statement that it was okay to do it as long as he didn't hear about it?
My impression was that they wanted to keep away or keep out of anything that did not involve their orders or their...
Well, keeping out of it is one thing if it's going on. Stopping it from going on if it's improper is something else. Are you saying that they wanted to stop it from going on, or only
No.
Wait, let me finish the question. Or only that if it was going on, they didn't want to know anything about it, wanted to look the other way but allow it to go on?
Well, there was nothing wrong about our lobbying in the U.S. Congress, yet they didn't want to know about it.
Well, why did they take that attitude if there was nothing wrong with your lobbying?
I don't know. I don't know what the
Mr. Caleros, you doubtless know, one of the charges is that although the CIA might not have been involved in the drug dealing, they might have known about it and might have looked away but allowed it to go on with tacit approval. I'm not saying they did that, but I'm just asking you the question in some detail to clarify your own testimony, that they just didn't look the other way knowing it was going on. You're saying that they wanted to stop anything from going on that was illegal.
No, what I said, I answered you asked me if they were involved in fund collecting. And I told you that when we would talk about fundraising, then they said, look, that's fundraising in the common, ordinary way that it was done, or fundraising or trying to get U.S. congressional approval for funds. They would not want to hear about that. I have not said that, we were talking about other things that they didn't want to hear about. No, just those two specific things. Because that was out of their...
Excuse me?
That was out of their
it was out of their line to be involved in what the Congress
yes.
did on fundraising.
Yes.
Providing funds for the Contras.
Yeah, fundraising was out of their line, and so was lobbying the U.S. Congress.
Senator Shelby?
Thank you. Senator Spector's been over some of these questions, but I'm going to continue if you'll be patient. To your knowledge, Mr. Calero, did the Central Intelligence Agency, the Drug Enforcement Agency, or any other government agency of the United States promote drug trafficking as a means to raise funds for resistance efforts in Nicaragua in the 80s?
Not only they did not, to my knowledge, they did not ever promote any such thing, but did not promote anything else that that would be wrong or out of their line of duty.
Did you or any member of your organizations that were involved in trying to get rid of the government in Nicaragua promote the trafficking of narcotics as a means of fundraising in any way or anywhere, especially in the United States? Did anybody officially connected with your organization?
Excuse me.
You go ahead.
My knowledge, no one, Nicaraguan or non-Nicaraguan, ever connected with the organization promoted in any way any criminal activity. And had they done it, I would have been the first to call them to order or to denounce the thing, because we could not afford to have, we were trying to look our best, trying to appeal to some 400 some odd or 500 some odd U.S. government congressional representatives who had the saying about the funding.
You were basically trying to promote democracy in your country.
We were promoting democracy. We were promoting honesty. I will tell you, I mean, not because I did it, but when I had to appear before Congress or before the Independent Council, Judge Walsh's, I talked to the mayor of Miami and some other friends in Miami. I said, I've been cited for a grand jury. I need a lawyer because I don't know much about what happens here. And so these young men, they look for a young lawyer, able. He says, well, my first recommendation is that you appeal to the Fifth Amendment. And I say, like hell, I said, if I'm going to do that, I don't need a lawyer.
You had nothing to hide, did you?
I have nothing. I'm going to come before these people, and I'm going to answer all questions, and I'm going to turn in all records, and I did that I turned that into Senator Orrin Hatch, I remember.
Sir, would you be in a position as in your organization, the Contra, one of the Contra organizations, to know if there was drug trafficking involved or an effort by some people in your organization to sell drugs to raise money for the overall effort to overthrow the government?
Well, I can tell you, money, you cannot hide. If there's anything you cannot do is hide money, you know. Money shows if anybody is handling it. And we always had people asking us for money for needs, for humanitarian needs, to help family members, to help themselves, to have, to get medicines, to get medical attention when we didn't have much of that. And I never saw anyone, you know, showing up with money or going to bar rooms or driving new vehicles or using new clothes or anything like that, which can give you an idea that something's wrong.
Sure. Let me ask you this, sir. Senator Specter talked to you about Mr. Blandon and Meneses. Meneses, is that how you say his name?
Blandon?
Meneses, is that?
Oh, Meneses.
Meneses.
Meneses, yeah.
And their role. Was Mr. Blandon one of the founders of the FDN in the state of California?
The founders,
to your knowledge?
The founders of the FDN, because it was founded before I arrived.
Absolutely.
The founders of the FDN were disenchanted Sandinista fighters who left Nicaragua and went into Honduras and joined up with former National Guardsmen and made up the organization, and then got help from the Argentines, and then went up to Washington and got some help. When I came to the FDN in 1983, there was already U.S. funding for the effort.
Did you ever pose for a photograph with Mr. Blandon or Mr. Meneses?
Well, I tell you.
And if so, where did this take place and when?
I appeared on TV constantly, in newspapers, here in this country, in other countries. And I became, whether I liked it or not, sort of a celebrity. I used to be stopped in the streets, in stores, in many places, and people in airplanes, if anybody who had a camera with him would want to have a picture taken with me. And when I came to these meetings of Nicaraguans in San Francisco, New Orleans, Los Angeles, Chicago, and whatnot, you know, everybody wanted to have a picture taken with me. And so I had hundreds and hundreds of pictures taken with Nicaraguans, with people that I didn't know, that I will never see again. But that was the usual, and I think that's very, very much American. To, you know, movie actors and this, not the other thing. Everybody wants to have a picture taken with them.
Did you know this gentleman personally, Mr. Meneses?
Meneses, I met him in California, in San Francisco, personally.
Do you remember what year that was?
85, maybe, 84, 86. I never met him in Nicaragua.
Did you talk to him when you met him in California?
I talked to him, but
Did you have an extended conversation about your role in the government, what you were trying to do, or how you were going to raise money, or how he could raise money?
No. I never, look, not even rich Nicaraguans ever gave us any money, because they said that the money needed was so much that it was impossible for them besides Nicaraguans who were in the United States were not in good economic shape. You know, most of them had left all their belongings and things back home. The only Nicaraguan that I remember that specifically gave me and gave it to me personally money was Mr. Lacayo, the president of the Coca-Cola company I used to work for. He gave me $10,000 to open up the office here in.
And where did that $10,000 come from? Out of his own pocket?
Out of his own pocket, yeah.
Is he a businessman or something?
He was, yeah.
Good reputation.
A businessman with a lot of money, I mean,
Okay.
Millionaire, you know. He was the owner of the Coca-Cola franchise in Nicaragua that I worked for.
Did either one of these men, Meneses and Blandon, did they ever hold, to your knowledge, any official position with your organization?
To my knowledge, I never held any official position. We used to have a representative in each Nicaraguan community in these cities, you know, and usually we would pick the leader of the Nicaraguans. We would pick the person who had been there longer, the person who had the facility, who was known by everyone, and to have gatherings or to have meetings. And in San Francisco, that person, and I told Mr. Cummings, Tony Navarro is the name, and he's been there. He went to, there was a big Nicaraguan migration in the 40s to California, so he went there in the 40s. I mean, he'd been there for a long time. And he has a body shop there, which is very, very successful, I understand.
Sir, did you or anyone in the higher echelons of your organization ever discuss any possibility of using money raised from the sale of trafficking in drugs to overthrow the government in Nicaragua? Was it ever brought up in any type of discussion when you were trying to raise money?
Before in my presence, there was never any such discussion.
Have you ever heard of any other discussions that were not made in your presence or inklings that this may have been discussed in your organization?
The only thing I heard about drugs is the fact that some of our troops inside Nicaragua at times would come upon marijuana patches, you know.
Growing in the country.
Yeah, growing in the country. So they would cut some for themselves and use it at some point, you know, during their sojourn, because some of them used to stay 2, 3, 4 months inside Nicaragua. You know? So that's the only thing I ever heard connected with drugs. And then I read in the papers also allegations about drugs, but
when did you first read this in the papers, and what papers or news account?
About this?
About allegations of drugs.
Oh, way back after my second trip to San Francisco.
Was this back in the 80s?
Back in the 85? Back in 85, 86, 87, I don't remember exactly.
And what did you read or hear then about
this? Some newspaperman from the Chronicle or
San Francisco Chronicle
or maybe the other paper there, called me about this fellow Meneses. So there must have been something.
And what he called you about that? What was the conversation?
I don't remember exactly what, but he wanted to find out about him,
about the man,
about this man, and what was our tie.
Do you have any link to him, in other words?
To what link we had, why, and so I told him exactly what I've said here, you know. And because they had him, I think that the press or the media already had Meneses in the eye, you know. I mean, they suspected something about him, but he was never jailed. That I don't
They
know.
were focusing on him anyway.
Yeah, right. And I never saw him. After that, I never saw him. Nor would I have ever wanted to see him, because the least thing I needed at the time were problems.
Do you believe, of your own knowledge and the positions you've held in the Contra organization, that the CIA was ever involved in any official capacity or unofficial capacity in promoting drug trafficking to raise money?
I mean, if you allow me the use of an American slang,
You go ahead.
I would say that that all of this story, rather than about crack, is about crap. That's my
Crap.
Yes. Rather than crack, is crap. That's the way I look at it. It's a preposterous,
Unfounded?
unfounded, ridiculous, well, preposterous is ridiculous, absurd.
Now, we will have order, we will have order in the hearing. If you have anything you would like to tell the committee, we will be glad to receive them.
Yeah, tell it.
We are proceeding.
These guys are on the ground. They know about what happened. They have documents that they sent to the DEA showing about this stuff.
We are going to have to proceed with this hearing. If there is anything you have to tell the committee, we will be glad to hear from you. We have talked to Mr. Officer, stand aside. Officers, stand aside. Officers, stand aside.
Because you called it all of a sudden so that you wouldn't know. What's going on here?
Well, what's going on right now is
We are calling every relevant witness who is called. We will be glad to talk to you to get your suggestions, and we will call. Mr. Calero, would you proceed?
quite the difference.
And here's the evidence in this special report if anybody cares to find out what the truth is. Because we do not want to see another cover-up and hundreds of young drug dealers put in jail.
If anybody has any information to present to this committee, we are interested in receiving it. We understand the high level of emotional involvement, and we are prepared to allow some leeway to have you express yourselves, although this is not in accordance with the regular rules. We are prepared to listen to you.
We have people dying right now. We need answers now, and we need things to change now. The hearing, forget about the hearing. What's going on in our communities now needs to stop, and we need answers from you and solutions from the communities that are being affected by this.
We are prepared to listen to anyone who has anything to say on this subject. This meeting was not called suddenly. This meeting was scheduled 3 weeks ago, and notice was given. This committee is treating this issue as a very serious matter. Now we'll proceed with Mr. Calero. Anybody who wants to talk to us may do so. Mr. Calero, will you proceed? We'll hear from Congresswoman Waters in a moment or two. Let us finish with Mr. Calero.
All right.
Senator Shelby?
Mr. Chairman, I just believe that, as I said earlier, I wanted to commend you again for calling, and I know this is probably the first of many hearings, an open hearing, not a closed hearing, but I do believe that we ought to hear from these other people, you know, that they've got a right to testify here before us, and we need to get to the bottom of this, and I suppose that today's hearings is just the beginning of a number of hearings that you would have. I'd hope.
Well, as I said at the outset, Senator Shelby, we convened the first hearing promptly upon the adjournment of the Congress in response to the San Jose newspapers. We have then been proceeding to talk to everyone who was identified in that newspaper article. We have met with leaders of the African-American community. Congressman Waters and I talked before the last hearings. Congresswoman Waters just stood up, and we'd be glad to hear what you have to say, Congresswoman Waters. Well, you're invited to come join us and ask the question. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say to you that when the officers approached the man who was standing, I'm not going to have the conclusion of this hearing that people who were expressing themselves were ousted by the Capitol Police. I'm not going to have that happen. I can understand that the emotions are running very high. This committee has responded very promptly and in an intense way to get to the bottom of this matter and to find out what is going on. We convened the first hearing on October 23rd, and we heard from Jack Bloom, who had been the counsel for Senate subcommittee in 1989, and we heard from the Inspector General of the CIA and the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. And as we said on the record, Senator Kerry and I, we were not satisfied with their authority without the subpoena power. And at that time, Congressman Waters was here, and we had a brief conversation, as I just did with Mr. Fumet, head of the NAACP, and Congressman Cummings. And if Congressman Waters has a question that she would like to ask, a line of questions, she is welcome to do so. It is not the regular proceeding, but we are glad to expand it. When you stand up and speak out, it does not help us get to the facts. Anybody who has any witness or anybody you think we ought to be talking to, we are interested in your suggestions. And now we'd be pleased to hear from our colleague on the House side, Congresswoman Waters.
Thank you very much, Senator Specter. I do appreciate the opportunity to raise some questions that I have formulated. I know this is an unusual way of doing business. As a member of the other House, this is not normally done. But I certainly respect the fact that you understand that there is high interest and that you have allowed some of the members of this audience to express themselves, and you have made it clear that you are about the business of getting to the bottom of information and not about the business of ejecting or having to use police. So I'm real pleased. I think this is good. This is a good start. And I wish to raise a number of questions. First of all, to make sure that we have the right person, Mr. Adolfo Calero. You are a 1953 graduate of Notre Dame, is that correct?
Correct.
You were the manager of the Coca-Cola bottling plant in Managua before the Sandinista Revolution?
Correct.
You did meet with Mr. Norman Meneses. You have said that you were in a meeting with him maybe 2 times, and you didn't remember quite what year, but would you agree that that was 1984?
Could have been.
Were you recruited by the CIA to serve on the FDN Directorate in 1983?
No. The first invitation I received to join the movement was extended to me by Mr. Enrique Bermudez, who was the military chief at the time, through a newspaperman who had been to Honduras and came to Nicaragua. And
was Mr. Bermudez a CIA operative? Had you ever heard that before?
No, he was a member of the Nicaraguan National Guard, and he was, for a number of years, the military attaché of the Nicaraguan government in Washington, D.C.
Had you ever heard that he was a CIA operative?
I'm supposed to be one too, and anybody.
No, but no, I'm not you right now. I want to know about Mr.
What I'm
Bermudez.
trying to say is that anyone who has anything or any relation with Americans in many of these countries, many of our countries, is called the CIA operative. I mean, so it's a.
So you did hear the rumor that he was a CIA operative.
I heard, yeah, I've heard, as I said, I've heard of me, and I heard of him.
Did you become the president and commander-in-chief of the FDN Directorate?
Did what?
Did you become the president and commander-in-chief of the FDN Directorate?
Yes, in October of 1983.
Did you ever work for the CIA in Nicaragua prior to even becoming the president of the Directorate?
I have never worked for any government, not even my government. I have never been under the employ of any government, and my only employments have been with private enterprise.
Did you work with the embassy in Nicaragua?
I never worked for
Not
any
as a paid
embassy.
employee, as a citizen who helped to distribute funds that were given to service organizations in Nicaragua. Did you serve that role for the embassy?
I have been consulted a number of times by the United States Embassy as to what's my idea, my opinion about certain people or about certain organizations.
Did you help to direct funds from the embassy to certain organizations in Nicaragua?
I would say that maybe on account of the fact that I recommended a worthy cause, that funds might have gone to that organization.
Did you work in conjunction with the CIA designated person of the embassy in distributing those funds?
I did not work. As I said,
Not work, you weren't on the payroll, but you were a citizen who worked with them.
Let's say I was a sort of a consultant. I was a sort of an advisor to many U.S. government representatives, yes.
All right, so there was a connection with the embassy. The persons that you worked with could or could not have been CIA connected, and you helped to give them advice about who to give funds to in Nicaragua, those service organizations. Are we correct in concluding
and
that?
I would, to this day, if Americans, to begin with, I am very much appreciative of this country. I consider this my second country. And anything I can do for this country, for the good of it, I will always do. And
oh, no, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to establish the connection so that we understand that we're talking on the same wavelength here.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Norman Meneses was a known drug dealer in Nicaragua. Did you know that?
no,
You do not know that he was called the kingpin of narcotics traffickers in Nicaragua prior to the fall of Somoza?
no.
Never heard of him before?
I never. I heard of him before, but in a matter of some automobiles. I remember something came out in the paper, but I just...
No, that was in San Francisco, where he owned an automobile dealership. But prior to coming to the United States, he was very well known in Nicaragua. He was a drug dealer before he ever came to the United States. And
Well,
you knew
I
his
never-
brother-in-law, didn't you?
Ah,
Did you know his brother-in-law?
his brother. Who was his brother-in-law? I have no idea.
Did you know any of his relatives?
I knew of his brother, who was a general, but I don't remember ever meeting him.
Do you know Carlos Acaza?
Carlos
Yes.
Icaza.
A Nicaraguan attorney?
Carlos Icaza. Yeah, a Nicaraguan attorney.
Yes.
I know him. Yes,
Did he ever represent you?
He used to work with us in the effort. Yes.
Did you know he was a son-in-law of Meneses?
Yeah. Well, he had been divorced by the time that he was married to someone else. And don't say Meneses because we're talking about many Meneses here. Carlos Icaza was married to a lady, the daughter of a man by the name of Meneses, who was the Nicaraguan ambassador in Guatemala, and this ambassador was assassinated in 1978, and I believe at the time, Mr. Icaza, whose legal advice I have used throughout the years sometimes, was divorced of this Meneses woman and was married to someone else, and then married someone else, and then he's been married 4 times.
I guess what I'm trying to establish here is that Meneses was known, his relatives were known, you knew some Meneses, and I'm trying to understand whether or not you knew anything about Mr. Meneses while you were in Nicaragua. Had his name come up? Did you know he was a drug dealer? Did you know his relatives? Was this absolutely foreign to you until you first met him in San Francisco?
The name Meneses is well known in Nicaragua. They come from the northern part of Nicaragua, from Jinotega or someplace, and there were 2 General Meneses in the Nicaraguan army that were well known. One of them was ambassador of Nicaragua to Guatemala. So the name Meneses was known to me, and the public activities of some of the members of that family were known to me, but the clandestine and delinquent activities of any other member of the family was not known to me.
All right. Do you know Mr. Pina Cabrera?
Who?
Pina Cabrera.
Peña.
Yes.
Peña Cabrera.
Cabrera, C-A-B-R-E-R-A. He was with the FDN. Pina Cabrera.
Peña.
Yeah. Did you know him?
Peña. I don't remember. The name doesn't strike me.
Did you know any member of the FDN in San Francisco that was arrested in 1984 on drug trafficking charges?
No. Not to my knowledge. I don't know who was arrested. And we had no members of FDN in the United States. I mean, we had delegates or representatives who would help us out politically, as I said at the beginning.
Did Mr. Bermudez ever tell you that he had given Mr. Meneses responsibility for intelligence and security in California?
He never told me that, and as far as I'm concerned, we did not need any security or intelligence in San Francisco or in New Orleans or in Chicago, for that matter.
When you met with Mr. Meneses in San Francisco, was there any discussion with Mr. Meneses about receiving help, money, resources for your work for the FDN?
Never. Never offered a penny, never gave us a penny. And if there was anyone to have received that, it would have been me, because people tend to want to give the money to the head men. They want the head men to know that they are contributing. And so if there had been any such donation, it would have come to me, I imagine, and it never came to me from Meneses, nor from anybody in San Francisco. We never got a penny there.
Are you aware of a money trail that was identified by the DEA and the FBI from the drug ring in Los Angeles through a Mr. Lister and Morello to a bank in Miami, and from there to the Contras? Do you know who Mr. Lister is?
Lister?
Yes.
Lister.
From Los Angeles?
No.
Were you aware of a bank in Miami that was identified as a bank that the money passed through to the Contras?
No, we used in Miami 1, 2, 3 banks. They were all foreign banks, but most of the money that all the transactions that took place were mostly at the Banco de America Central, called BAC, and I turned over to Senator Orrin Hatch back in 1987, I believe, all our bank accounts.
How did the money, for example, if an organization wanted to give money to the Contras in Los Angeles or San Francisco, where would they take that money and who would they give it to?
They would have given it to Tony Navarro, I believe, I mean, who was the guy known and trusted and with a good reputation in San Francisco. Or they would have answered maybe one of these mailings that went out and asked for funds, you know, through the Nicaraguan American Development Foundation, which was established in Washington, or through a speech channel, which I don't remember what the name of his organization was called. Otherwise, there was no way, because we didn't have any bank accounts in California or in...
Mr. Calero, as you explained, when you went into Los Angeles and other areas, you were connected with the Nicaraguan community. They would hold events, rallies or fundraisers, and I suppose there would be talk and discussion about the Nicaraguans that had come to this country, what they were doing, how they were progressing, because you had a lot of families here involved, people who left, who came here. And so in these Nicaraguan communities, as these discussions went on, did you hear any discussions about any of those who had come from Nicaragua who may have been arrested or who had gotten in trouble or who had sought some help because they had gotten in trouble?
No. I never heard of such problems, or nobody ever asked me to help him out in that regard.
Did you ever hear about the Blandón drug ring? There were 200 Nicaraguans involved. There was a big raid in Los Angeles on 14 properties of Danilo Blandón's, drugs supplied to him by Meneses. It was a big deal. The LA County sheriffs raided these 14 properties, and that's where Mr. Lister identified his connection with the CIA, and that's where they found drug scales, small amounts of drugs, cutting agents, and other kinds of things. With that many Nicaraguans involved in a big drug raid, are you saying that you never heard about it? No one ever discussed it?
No, never heard about it, never discussed it. With me, I can answer. Maybe with other people, they could have discussed it, whatever they want to. But with me, never. Never anyone approached me to discuss any drug-related matter.
Have you talked to Mr. Meneses since he's been in prison in Nicaragua?
No, I have no reason to speak to him, nor would I want to speak to him.
Did you hear that he was in jail, and did you know why he's in jail?
I read in the paper that he was in jail, and I was happy for it.
Why were you happy for him?
Because any delinquent should be in jail.
Delinquent?
Delinquents, criminals should be in jail.
Why did you think he was a criminal?
Well, because anybody who deals in drugs is a criminal.
When did you learn he was dealing in drugs?
When I saw that he was captured in Managua about 2 years ago, about 2.5 years ago, I don't know.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to raise that information with Mr. Calero because the drug ring in Los Angeles was a drug ring, and the drugs were basically supplied by Mr. Meneses, who was a drug smuggler before he left Managua. He was dealing in drugs before he left. The interesting question, Mr. Chairman, is how did he get into this country? Not only was he a known drug dealer in Managua, he was also associated with a murder there before he ever came into this country. How did he walk into the United States undetected as a drug dealer and operate for almost 10 years without ever being arrested?
Any line of inquiry that you have to suggest, Congressman Waters, the committee would be glad to entertain. And that was the conversation which you and I had here on October 23rd. And we appreciate any suggestions you have, or any suggestions which anyone may have. I can understand the very deep concern which is present in this country about these charges. And that is why this committee is proceeding to conduct these inquiry. And if anybody has any suggestion as to whom ought to be talked to, we want to hear about it. We saw the reports about Director Deutsch's appearance in Los Angeles on November 15th, and we heard people in that audience, and we have talked to them to get any information which they may have.
Do you have anyone here from the DEA, Mr. Chairman, today? They have extensive files on this operation.
From the DEA?
The DEA has extensive files.
Congresswoman Waters, let's you and I talk about it. We have contacted the DEA, and we are dealing to obtain information from them, and we have representatives of the Department of Justice here today. Well, let us proceed now with Mr. Pastora. And if you would...
What about the guns?
Let us proceed and see how far we get, and if there's someone here from DEA, I'm going to press on that because I've talked with the Inspector General, and he told me they had a room full of files on the Blandone-Meneses drug dealing operation, and we'll see what we can find out. But let's follow the chairman for a minute here.
We now turn to Mr. Eden Pastora, who is known as Commander Zero of the effort, Sandinistas' most popular war hero and a senior official of their government until he distanced themselves from them in 1981. And in April of 1982, he publicly announced his opposition to the Sandinista regime. In April 1983, he took up arms against the Sandinistas and became the preeminent leader of the Nicaragua resistance on the so-called Southern Front. Before proceeding to Mr. Pastora's testimony, the committee would like to thank our two interpreters, Mrs. Stephanie Van Regensburg and Ms. Patricia Arizu from the Department of State, who are providing the translation here for Mr. Pastora. Mr. Pastora, let us proceed now to hear from you as to your general background. Where were you born? Where were you educated? Give us your chronological history until you finished your education, please.
Nací en Ciudad Darío, Matagalpa, Nicaragua.
I was born in Matagalpa, Nicaragua, in the city of Aribe.
En enero cumplo 60 años de edad.
In January, I will be 60.
Soy hijo de una artesana,
I am the son of an artisan,
Elsie Gómez, que fue educada en Luisiana, New Orleans,
Elsa Gomez, who was educated in New Orleans
hasta los 25 años de edad.
until she was 25.
Hijo de Pánfilo Pastora, un campesino.
My father was Pamphilo Pastora. He was a peasant.
Estudié bachillerato con los sacerdotes jesuitas en el Colegio Centroamérica de Granada.
I did high school in a Jesuit high school in Granada, Nicaragua.
A los 7 años de edad perdí a mi padre asesinado por el somocismo.
When I was 7, I lost my father. He was murdered by the Somoza regime.
Estudié medicina 5 años en la Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara, México.
I studied medicine for 5 years in the university in Guadalajara, in Mexico.
No pude terminar los estudios de medicina por incorporarme a la política armada en Nicaragua contra el régimen fascista somocista.
I was unable to finish my medical studies because I joined the armed resistance against the fascist regime of Somoza.
Desde muy joven, a la edad de 20 años, abracé las ideas revolucionarias sandinistas.
From a very young age, from the age of 20, I embraced the revolutionary ideas of the Sandinistas.
Aún me considero un gran sandinista y un buen revolucionario.
I still consider myself to be a great Sandinista and a good revolutionary.
Por esas causas he luchado 3 guerrillas y 3 guerras en defensa de la libertad, la democracia y la revolución en mi patria, Nicaragua.
For these causes, I have fought in 3 guerrilla conflicts and 3 wars for freedom, democracy, and revolution in my country.
Tuve problemas en 1984 con la Central de Inteligencia Americana
I had problems in the year 1984 with the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States.
Cuando fundé la Alianza Revolucionaria Democrática ARDE en el sur de Nicaragua.
When I founded the Revolutionary Democratic Alliance in the south of Nicaragua.
Por falta de recursos económicos nos retiramos de la política armada en mayo de 1986.
Because of lack of financial resources, we withdrew from the armed conflict in May of 1986.
En 1959 fundé el Frente Revolucionario Sandino.
In 1959, I founded the Sandino Revolutionary Front.
What year was that?
¿En qué año?
1959.
1959.
El Frente Revolucionario Sandino.
It was called the Sandino Revolutionary Front.
En 1961-62 soy cofundador del Frente Sandinista de Liberación Nacional.
In 1961 and 62, I was the co-founder of the Sandinista Revolutionary Front, or Front for National Liberation, excuse me.
Después del triunfo de la revolución en 1979, fui fundador de las milicias populares sandinistas.
After the triumph of the revolution in 1979, I was the founder of the popular militia, the Sandinista Popular or People's Militia.
Comandante guerrillero, comandante de brigada.
I was a guerrilla comandante, I was a brigade commander.
Viceministro del Interior, viceministro de la Defensa del Gobierno Popular Sandinista.
And I was Vice Minister of the Interior and Vice Minister of Defense of the Sandinista government.
Cristiano y católico.
I'm a Christian, I'm a Catholic.
Educado en una familia muy conservadora, de costumbres conservadoras.
I was educated in a very conservative family, a family with conservative traditions.
No tengo casa propia.
I do not have a home of my own.
No tengo automóvil.
I do not own a car.
No tengo empresas.
I do not own any business.
Soy pescador artesanal.
I'm a fisherman.
Mis adversarios políticos me han dicho de todo.
My political enemies have called me every name.
Menos ladrón.
Except for thief,
Cobarde.
coward,
Mentiroso.
liar,
Ni drogadicto.
or drug addict.
No fumo.
I do not smoke.
No bebo.
I do not drink.
Soy un luchador social.
I fight for social justice.
Acabo de fundar en 1990-96 un partido político en Nicaragua.
In the years 1990 to 1996, I have founded a political party in Nicaragua.
El Partido de Acción Democrática.
It's the Party of Democratic Action, or the Democratic Action Party.
El partido me inscribe como candidato para las elecciones de 1996.
I was registered as a candidate of my party in the elections of 1996.
El 15 de junio de 1996, el Consejo Supremo Electoral me inhibe de participar como candidato.
And on June 15th of 1996, the Supreme Electoral Tribunal prevented me from participating.
Siendo yo un patriota que he luchado 40 años por la libertad de mi pueblo.
Despite the fact that I'm a patriot who has fought for 40 years for the freedom of my people.
Me encuentro aquí invitado por ustedes.
I am here at your invitation.
A quien les rindo las gracias.
I thank you for that.
Por el hecho que me prometieron que con esta investigación iba a ir a fondo la investigación sobre el narcotráfico.
I thank you for the fact that you have promised me that this investigation will go to the bottom of the discussion on drug trafficking.
Vengo a decirles, por razones políticas, que son las razones por las que he luchado toda mi vida.
I come here to tell you for political reasons, and those are the reasons that I have fought my whole life long.
A los políticos norteamericanos.
I come here to say to U.S. politicians,
a los periodistas norteamericanos,
to U.S. journalists,
que lleguemos hasta el fondo.
Let's get to the bottom of this.
Voy a hablar sin miedo.
I am going to speak without fear.
Una característica de toda mi vida.
That's something which has characterized me my whole life long.
Voy a hablar con sinceridad.
I am going to speak with sincerity.
Lo que antes creí que era una virtud y que hoy me doy cuenta que es un defecto.
I used to think that was a virtue, but now I realize it's a defect.
para poderle decir a los norteamericanos, parodiando a su héroe Patrick Henry,
Oh, Patrick Henry. I would parody your hero, Patrick Henry, when I say,
que una vez le dijo a sus adversarios, dadme la libertad o dadme la muerte.
saying to my enemies, give me liberty or give me death.
Poderles decir a ustedes,
And here I would say to you,
investiguen esto a fondo
investigate this to its depth
y nos ponen las esposas y nos llevan a la cárcel
and either put the handcuffs on us and take us to jail
o nos devuelven la honra.
or give our honor back to us.
Es insoportable para un hombre honesto
It is intolerable for an honest man
estar en esta situación.
to be in this situation.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pastor. We appreciate your coming here today. Mr. Pastor, according to an October 31st, 1996 Washington Post article, two of your representatives, Octavio Cesar and Adolfo Popo Chamorro, said they asked a CIA official if they could accept the offer of airplanes and cash from a Miami-based drug dealer, George Morales. Chamorro is quoted as saying that, I called our contact at the CIA, of course I did, and they said Morales was fine. First of all, do you understand the question?
En primer lugar, ¿entiende usted esta?
Or do you understand that information?
Sí, perfectamente.
Yes, I understand perfectly well.
Do you have any knowledge of the Miami-based drug dealer, George Morales?
Bueno, no sé si ellos tuvieron este contacto con George Morales con autorización o sin autorización de la Central de Inteligencia Americana.
I don't know if they had this contact with George Morales with or without the authorization of the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States.
Well, have you ever heard of George Morales?
Perfectamente bien.
Yes, I have.
And what do you know about George Morales?
Octaviano César y Popo Chamorro me llevaron después del 84, cuando ya no tenía yo contactos con la Central de Inteligencia Americana, cuando ya el gobierno de Estados Unidos, a través de la CIA, no nos ayudaba. Octaviano César y Popo Chamorro me llevaron una ayuda de $20,000. Posteriormente me llevaron una ayuda de otros $20,000 y creo, si mal no recuerdo, otra ayuda de $30,000 o $40,000.
Octaviano César and Poco Chamorro, after 1984, when I no longer had contact with the CIA and after the United States government had stopped assisting us, Octaviano César gave me a contribution of $20,000.
Who gave the contribution?
¿Quién dio la contribución?
A nombre de un contacto que ellos habían tenido con un millonario norteamericano, empresario de transporte aéreo de nombre George Morales.
This was a contribution, I'll finish what he said before, of $20,000, followed by a later contribution of $20,000, and I think a third one of perhaps $30,000 from a contact which they had with an American air transport millionaire whose name was George Morales.
Posteriormente, el millonario de transporte aéreo mandaba de regalo un avión Titán 404 que estuvo estacionado en el aeropuerto Pavas a nombre de Popo Chamorro.
Later, this millionaire in air transportation sent a gift in the form of a Titan 304 aircraft, which was on the apron at the Pavas airport, and it was in the name of Popo Chamorro.
Para entonces nosotros ya no teníamos recursos. Estoy hablando a mediados o a fines del 84.
We had no money any longer at this point. I'm talking about the middle toward the end of 1984.
La CIA no solo no nos permitía la ayuda económica, sino que nos bloqueaba toda ayuda independiente.
Not only did the CIA not provide us with any financial assistance, but it also blocked economic assistance from reaching us.
En esos meses, yo recogía dinero con los cubanos de la factoría dólar por dólar y recogía mensualmente un promedio de 40, 50 mil dólares con lo que financiaba la lucha en el sur.
During those months, I got money dollar for dollar from the Cuban factory over the course of this period, $40,000 to $50,000.
En ese mismo tiempo, José Morales nos mandó de regalo otro avión, un DC-3, que lo llevaron al aeropuerto Ilopango de El Salvador.
At that same time, George Morales gave us as a gift another aircraft, this one a DC-3, which he sent to Ilopango Airport in San Salvador.
Octaviano César y Popo Chamorro me participaron que el millonario George Morales quería conocer al comandante en jefe Edén Pastora Gómez.
Octaviano César and Popo Chamorro told me that this millionaire, George Morales, wanted to meet the commander-in-chief, Edén Pastora.
Algo que yo vi lógico y normal.
I found this logical and normal.
En un viaje a Miami, Octaviano César y Popo Chamorro me llevaron donde la primera esposa de Popo Chamorro a entrevistarme con el mencionado George Morales.
On a trip that I made to Miami, Octaviano César and Popo Chamorro took me to the home of Chamorro's first wife, where I met this George Morales.
Eran las primeras horas de la noche, no recuerdo si era las 7 o las 8 de la noche, y llega José Morales a la reunión.
It was early in the evening, I can't remember if it was 7 or 8, and George Morales came into this group.
Can you fix the approximate date of that meeting?
Serían los últimos meses del 84, primeros del 85.
It was the end of 84 or the first few months of 85.
Noté que José Morales no entraba a una conversación de fondo como yo quería, política ideológica.
I realized that George Morales, I couldn't get him into a real in-depth conversation, a political conversation or an ideological conversation, as I wanted him to.
El porte y aspecto del señor José Morales lo vi muy raro, extraño pues.
I found his bearing and his way of being very strange.
Él me hablaba solo de lanchas y de una conversación y mantenía una conversación superficial.
He talked about small boats, launches, and insisted on maintaining a very superficial kind of conversation.
Aproveché una llamada por teléfono que le hicieron para irme a donde la ex esposa de Popo Chamorro.
I took advantage of the fact that he got a telephone call to go to Popo Chamorro's former wife.
Y le pregunté quién era ese tipo.
And I asked, who is this guy?
Ella se extrañó mucho de que yo no supiera que era el narcotraficante José Morales.
She was very surprised that I didn't realize that he was the drug trafficker George Morales.
Me contó parte de la historia rápido.
She told me part of the story very quickly.
Y me dijo que ella le tenía miedo porque acababa de asesinar a su marido.
She said that she was very frightened of him because he had just killed her husband.
Que era piloto de José Morales y que sabía mucho.
That he was a pilot and he knew a lot, George Morales.
Y en ese momento me di cuenta del peligro en que me encontraba.
And at that point I realized the danger I was in.
Sospeché de que podía ser una trama de quererme ensuciar en el narcotráfico por mi espíritu independiente.
I suspected that it might have been a trap to get me involved in drug trafficking because I had an independent spirit.
Mandé a llamar por teléfono inmediatamente a Octaviano y a Popo Chamorro que llegaron a mi llamada.
I immediately had Octaviano, Cesar, and Popo Chamorro called by phone, and they came right away.
Les reclamé fuertemente y ellos hicieron los extrañados porque yo no sabía.
I complained bitterly about this, and they acted surprised and said that they didn't know.
Les
They
dije que
said, Popo Chamorro and Octavio Cesar said that they did not know what?
yo no sabía que Josh Morales era narcotraficante.
I said that I didn't know that George Morales was a drug trafficker.
And what did Popo Chamorro and Octavio Cesar say? Question is, did Chamorro and Cesar know that Morales was a drug trafficker?
Yo supongo que sí, estoy seguro de que
I
sí.
suppose, yes, I'm sure they knew.
They knew.
Ellos me aceptaron de que Josh Morales era narcotraficante, era lo que era, pues.
They accepted that he was a drug trafficker.
Well, let us come back to the citation that I started with from the October 31st, 1996 Washington Post article, which said that Cesar and Chamorro asked a CIA official if they could accept the offer of airplanes and cash from Morales, a Miami-based drug dealer. Chamorro is quoted as saying that Chamorro called the contact at the CIA who said that Morales was fine. Now, do you know anything about a CIA contact who dealt with either Chamorro or Cesar?
No, no sé.
No, I do not know.
Had you seen that article in the Washington Post on October 31st, 1996?
No lo he leído, pero me lo han contado.
I have not read it myself, but I've been told about it.
It had been called to your attention.
Positivo.
That is right.
Did you make any effort to find out if that article was correct, which quotes Cesar and Chamorro as contacting a CIA representative to check on Morales?
En esos meses estábamos en el ajetreo político de la campaña electoral en Nicaragua y no tuve tiempo.
In these months, we were in the excitement of the political campaign in Nicaragua, and I really didn't have time.
Well, when did the campaign end?
Cuando terminamos la campaña es cuando llegaron sus dos enviados a platicar conmigo. Y entonces hablamos de este caso y aceptamos la invitación a venir a hablar con ustedes.
The campaign had just ended when your two representatives came to talk to us, and we accepted the invitation to come here.
Did you instruct your associates to check with the CIA before accepting contributions from individuals believed to be narcotics traffickers?
No, estábamos rotos con la Central de Inteligencia Americana.
No, we had completely broken relations with the CIA.
You testified that in 1984 you had problems with the CIA when you started your testimony. What were those problems with the CIA?
Eminentemente políticos.
mainly political problems.
El gobierno de Washington y el gobierno de Managua habían negociado en Manzanillo, México.
The U.S. government and the Nicaraguan government had negotiated in the city of Manzanillo in Mexico.
En 13 rondas de conversaciones habían negociado el cese de la guerra este-oeste en Nicaragua.
In 13 rounds of negotiation, they negotiated an end to the war in Nicaragua from east to west.
Habían negociado el alto a la guerra en El Salvador y el alto a la guerra en la contra en Nicaragua.
They negotiated a halt to the war in El Salvador and the end to the Contra war in Nicaragua.
A unos los manejaba uno y a otros los manejaba los otros.
One group was being managed by one group and the other by the other, or another.
El único frente independiente éramos nosotros los del sur.
The only independent front was the Southern Front, that was us.
Y eso ponía en peligro, en dificultades políticas a la central sandinista, a la Central de Inteligencia Americana, porque no podía manejar el sur.
This jeopardized the position of the CIA from a political point of view because they couldn't control the South.
Y como nosotros seguíamos una guerra de guerrillas en el sur, no podían parar abiertamente la guerra del norte.
And as we were proceeding with our guerrilla war in the South, they could not openly just stop the war in the North.
So you disagreed with the settlement which was made by the parties to the negotiations? And
Sí, señor. Discrepamos ese
That's
arreglo.
right. We disagreed with this settlement.
And you wanted to carry on the war?
Nosotros queríamos una guerra para ganar, no para
We
que nos
wanted
negociaran.
a war to win, not a war to be negotiated out.
Was that the totality of your problems with the CIA?
Eso era todo.
That was the only thing.
Lo demás es falso, es mentira.
The rest of it is false, the rest of it are lies.
What are you referring to as the lies now?
Que si nos quitaron la ayuda porque éramos narcotraficantes, que si nos quitaron la ayuda porque éramos comunistas, que si era un trabajo del frente, que si éramos los mismos del frente, etcétera, etcétera. Todas esas mentiras que se dijeron.
All the lies that were told at the time that they cut the aid off because we were drug traffickers, because we were communists, because we were part of the front, all of those lies which were propounded at that time.
Who said that the aid was cut off because you were drug traffickers?
Oí que aquí el señor Alan Fire había dicho que nos quitaban la ayuda del sur, a Arde, porque una agente de Pastora había estado en el narcotráfico.
I heard that Alan Fires said that they were cutting off aid to the Southern Front, to Arde, because some of the people of Eden Pastoras were drug traffickers.
Quiero dejar claro
I want to say clearly
que hasta mayo del 84,
that up to May of 1984,
que fue cuando rompimos con la CIA,
which was when we broke off with the CIA,
la CIA, en defensa de la seguridad del Estado norteamericano,
that the CIA, in defense of the United States,
tenía todo el dinero del mundo que le daba el Congreso americano y el gobierno norteamericano.
that the CIA had all the money in the world, money that it got from the U.S. Congress and the U.S. government.
Y hasta ese momento nos dio en el año 82, 83 y la mitad del 84 apenas 6 millones de dólares.
And up to that point, and I'm talking about 1982, 83, and half of 84, all they gave us was $6 million.
Did you have personal dealings with Mr. Fires?
Creo haberlo conocido con otro nombre.
I think I met him, but he was using a different name.
What name was he using?
No recuerdo, solo recuerdo los nombres de Duke Claridge, que usaba el nombre Mr. Maroni.
I don't remember. I just remember the name that Dewey Claridge used. He called himself Mr. Maroni.
Well, let's finish with Mr. Fires first. How many times did you meet Mr. Fires?
No sé, tal vez una o dos veces.
I don't know, perhaps once or twice.
And what did you talk about?
Hablábamos sobre la situación político-militar. Quiero hacer de su conocimiento que yo era un comandante de campo, que el mayor tiempo lo pasaba en la montaña dirigiendo la guerra, que el hombre de la ciudad que administraba el dinero era Alfonso Robelo. Desde el 83 hasta mediados del 84, que rompimos también con Alfonso Robelo, él administró el dinero. Yo me mantenía principalmente, y puedo decir un 90% del tiempo, en la montaña.
We talked about the political and military situation. I do want to make one thing clear. I was a field commander, and I spent most of my time in the mountains directing our battles. The city person, so to speak, was Alfonso Robelo,